Good morning, fish keepers. Cam here from thefishroom.co.nz, and we've done it again. We've made it to Friday. Let's do coffee. That's a good coffee. So today we have another special guest on with us, but a little bit of quick admin to quickly roll through. Our Fish Wars is going on our Facebook page. So that's going in full swing. If you want to get involved in that and getting the chance to win yourself a prize every day, get amongst it, have your vote for your favorite fish, and away we go. And second of all, and which is probably more important, there is a lot of delays with freight coming into me and leaving me because of the major road works that are happening between Picton and Nelson. So there is generally about a day's with delay that's going on there. So please be with me. Please be with the couriers. Please be with everybody. It's just everything is a little bit delayed at the moment. So I think there's been another 2 or 3 weeks worth of work on that from the slips and from the floods that happened a couple months back. So just a reminder for everybody that's going on at the moment. That is literally all the admin that I've got today. So good morning, Gary. How you doing, buddy? So I'll push the right button and we'll introduce our guest. Good morning, Dean.
Good morning.
Cool. Thank you very much for joining us. I guess this is attempt number 2 after my first wee mistake about 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, that was a trip.
Yeah, well, we got there in the end.
Well, a lot of people don't know this has been about a year.
Yeah, it would have been a decent chunk of time.
I mean, trying to match schedules and everything, and things happening with my life and your life.
Yeah,
but we're here now. So yeah.
Daylight savings played a part as well. So there's a little bit of moving cogs that were going on for this one.
Yep.
All right, cool. So first of all, how did you get involved into fish keeping and in the hobby?
Myself?
Yeah.
Well, it started when I was 7 years old, which is over 50 years ago. Let's just say it that way. And we didn't have fish in our house. We had a couple little toy poodles, no rodent type animals, so no other pets. And a popular thing back in those days was, you got an allowance, but if you wanted anything more than your allowance, you had to go work for it. And so I had arranged with my mom's, her best friend, to go either weed or pick slugs. I can't remember that part for sure. So a popular thing was to pick slugs out of a garden, put them in a coffee can, and then you put salt on top. They all melt, right?
Yep.
But anyway, I had gone down to her place to do one of those 2 duties, and got all done. And she offers to have me come in and give me some lemonade. And on her kitchen counter was a fishbowl full of what we would now consider wild type guppies. So not really fancy guppies, just, guppies. And I'm like, wow, those are cool. And she's like, well, you want some of those for payment instead of money? And I'm like, yeah, but being the 7-year-old kid, I'm like, yeah, I'm not thinking where they're going to go or anything like that. Or if my parents are going to let me have them. I'm just like, so she puts them in a Tupperware bowl or a little Tupperware container, which is basically, like a food service thing. And I go home with 2 pairs of wild guppies. And my mom's like, what are you going to do with those? You don't have any place to put them. You don't have a fish bowl. We had nothing. So I literally kept them in the toilet bowl overnight.
Wow.
We had 2 bathrooms, and I had taped off the door to that bathroom. No one could go in it except for me. Every time a toilet would flush, I would run to make sure it wasn't the fish going down. And I ended up getting a fishbowl in the next several days. But that was my first start.
Yeah.
And I pretty much had fish ever since.
Wow.
Except for maybe a couple weeks, a couple months here and there.
Yeah. I've got young children myself, and I can kind of envision how that would happen, and the logic behind a child going, "Yeah, I'll take fish. Let's do this." And then, like you said, oh, now what do we do?
Right.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I was feeding them cracker crumbs and breadcrumbs. We didn't have fish food or anything, and back in those days, you didn't really worry about water conditioners. Most of the water wasn't even treated, coming through the municipals at that point in time.
Yeah.
So
I can imagine back then the water would have probably been a lot better than what it is.
Yeah.
At least anyway, so it probably wouldn't quite as big of a deal.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
So yeah.
Someone wants to know what the pH of your toilet bowl was.
I don't know. I mean, it was a toilet bowl, so you flush it, and I mean, again, at that point in time, you weren't adding anything to your toilet bowl. There was no disc in the tank dyeing it blue or anything. It was just water.
Yeah.
And I have no idea I didn't even know what pH was for probably the next year or so. So, yeah.
So what got you into breeding fish from the guppy and the toilet bowl start?
Well, of course, those guppies took care of breeding themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just fascinated with the baby fish. My parents had they basically had a lifelong subscription to National Geographic.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I didn't have money for books or anything like that. I was just a little kid, looking, here's my, money from weeding or doing extra chores or my little allowance. I'd never been to a quote pet store or a fish store, let alone. But somehow I started looking at all of the old National Geographics because my dad had them all on a shelf,
mm-hmm.
all in order. And I would go through them one at a time. And there was a lot of tropical fish articles in those back in the days.
Cool.
I ran across one. So what's on your t-shirt?
Some discus.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going along, for a few years and end up getting a paper route where you basically walk the streets and hand deliver the papers from your paper bag. And there's, I believe it's a May 1960 issue of National Geographic with discus on the cover.
Wow.
And I read that article and I was like, wow, these fish feed their own babies. I'm like, this is way too cool. So now I went from guppies to discus. And it was at I delivered a lot of papers to end up with quite a few dead discus.
Yep.
Because back in those days, pretty much the only discus that would come in were wild nickel and quarter size babies. Mm-hmm. And they didn't know a lot about them. So I literally went from guppies to discus. Discus, it was the first egg layer I spawned at the age of 13. Had no idea what I was doing. All I knew is I wanted to see them feeding from the side of the parents, which took another 5-6 months of trying. And after that happened, I went on to everything. I mean, any fish I could get a hold of, grammies, bettas, some of the early tetras, anything I could get a hold of, I would try to breed.
Got the bug straight away then.
Yeah. So the bug was there from a very young age, and I've been doing it ever since.
Cool. What's been the most rewarding species that you've kept and bred?
I don't know. I suppose I would still come back to the wild discus. Mm-hmm. I've been to Peru collecting 4 times now. The first time I brought back, well, I had 7 discus and 5 survived to the shipping and 4 survived shipping. And out of those 4, I ended up with 1 pairing. They only spawned 3 times, and I'm now spawning their babies.
Wow, nice.
So the F1s. And there's only one type of discus that comes out of Peru. It's what they call the Peruvian red spot green discus.
Mm-hmm.
And the green is not really the color of the stripes. They're considering the background of the discus kind of an olive green color.
All right. Yep.
Yeah. So it's not the blue stripes. It's the green background is where they get the green in that name. Yep. And in Peru, they're more valuable based on how many red spots they have.
It's interesting.
So yeah, so if it's more than 30 red spots, that's a really good discus. So yeah.
Is that a trait that people are specifically after, or is that something that the locals think are more of a higher quality fish?
I think the locals make it be more of a high quality fish.
Yeah, right.
In my experience in raising them, I haven't had large spawns. I've had a lot of fertility issues with those. Mm-hmm. My first inclination was the males get more red spots.
Okay.
Until a female comes along that's all red spotted. So, so to me, they look at it as the more red, the more expensive. And you can a lot of people have seen that solid red pencil fish that's been floating around out of Peru. It's a sport or it's a mutation basically that they consider it super, super valuable.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Is there any species that have sort of surprised you with getting them to successfully breed and raise the fry that, like, if I know you've tried a whole lot of things and all of a sudden you just sort of crack the code kind of thing?
Well, yeah. Congo tetras, long time ago, I spawned them by accident. And I'm like, wow, that's kind of cool. I need smaller food, Hey. Sorry about that.
You're right.
Okay, he might be fine. He might not. We'll see. But a lot of the smaller fish, I think. The larger cichlids. I mean, I did a little time with African cichlids in the early days, and I mean, right now in my neck of the woods, I can't sell African cichlid babies. No one wants them.
Yep.
Cool fish, though. I played with a lot of the early ones, the marleri, the lelupi, shell dwellers, all of those. But some of the more unique ones are and this is one that has evaded me. I was given some Congo puffers, the Shidone puffers. Mm-hmm. Ended up getting a pair, and they spawned for me about 4 or 5 times.
Wow.
I could only get the babies up to 8 days old.
Yeah.
And then they would all die at the same time. Right. And I talked to all different people. To me, I feel like it was water. My water was too soft for them, maybe, or I also thought that maybe I'm lacking calcium in the food that they're feeding on. Mm-hmm. But that is the smallest baby fish I've ever seen.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it makes bettas look tiny. I mean, it makes bettas look big, I should say.
Yeah.
It's just a real tiny fish. And the young or the babies under magnification kind of just look like a miniature puffer fish.
Wow.
But it evaded me, and I don't have those anymore, but someday I might try them again. I've talked to other people that they're raising marine rotifers to feed them at first, and I went through that whole thing, but the rotifers would die faster than the fish. So yeah,
not quite working there.
Yeah.
Do you have a particular methodology that you try and apply for the species that you're spawning, or do you just try and keep the best quality water, the best quality food, and let them kind of do their thing?
Well, my water out of the tap happens just to work really good for a lot of fish breeding.
Yeah.
It comes out of the tap at pH about 8.4, but that's an artificially high pH. It's based on stuff that the water department adds to the water. So you get it in the tank and under aeration, it'll drop naturally to a pH of about 7.2.
Okay.
It's very soft. So it works for all of the South American fish really easy. And being it's very soft, it's easier to make soft water hard than hard water soft. So I can easily add stuff to it. Or if I want to go towards the tea-colored water, I can add peat or wood. So setting up the water is easy for me. And then, basically, I try to purchase fish or obtain fish just from breeders. I don't want to go to I will occasionally get fish from the local store, but that's always a quarantine nightmare. So I try to get fish from breeders, and I want to get young fish. So, for example, and I've had L46 zebra plecos 3 times in my career. I guess you'd call it a career. I've always got like a group of 8 to 12 young at the same time from the same source. And then I'll spend the year or two growing them up. I want to do that with any fish that I've taken. I'd rather get the young ones, get them really conditioned to my water, my feeding habits, my water change habits, basically my tank setups.
Yeah.
And then by the time they're breeding size, they will be used to all that. And then I just have to find the right trigger. And, different fish have different triggers. Some of them you have to have different male-female ratios. Some it's a water change. Every one of them is a little bit different.
Do you keep all the notes written down in a little diary so you know for next time, or is it all just tucked up in here?
It's up here.
Yeah.
I've thought about doing the whole writing it down in a log, but there's so much going on that I would be spending more time writing than doing. So
you just touched on buying young fish, so you're growing them up for as long as you can. I actually had a customer of mine come in who likes spawning German rams, and he was saying that he's found if they don't spawn within the first sort of 6 or 7 months, he can't seem to get them to spawn from that point onwards. Is that quite true, or is that just something that he might have been experiencing himself?
Well, I find that rams will spawn from about 3 months old all the way up to 2 or 3 years old. But you'll have far better success with the younger ones than the older ones.
Okay.
And this also tends to work with discus also. If you pair with rams, if you pair an older male, like say you have a 7 or 8 month old male, and you pair that with a 3 or 4 month old female, you'll have a better success than if you take a 4 month old male and a 4 month old female.
Okay.
And I think it's basically because the older male has more experience. With discus, I used to do at one point in my career, I was basically commercially breeding discus. I had like 21, 22 pairs going at one time. All different types. And I had fry coming out my ears. I was shipping 3-4 days a week, or maybe I should say nights. But I would tend to pair a 2-year-old male with a 1-year-old female, and I would have far better success with fertility and everything.
Wow.
So it kind of works the same with the rams.
Yeah.
You
don't think it's a viability of the female as contributing to that, or you think it's just that the male is more mature and aware of the situation that's going on?
Well, I think when the females are younger but fertile, they're going to throw more eggs that are fertile.
Yeah, that makes sense.
As they get older, they tend to throw more eggs that are infertile.
Yeah,
I mean, they still spawn, and sometimes the spawn will get bigger when they get older. But I feel like they're better in their prime when they're younger, especially with the rams.
Yeah. Do you consider yourself a commercial breeder or a hobbyist breeder?
That's a good question. I consider myself a hobbyist breeder at heart.
Yeah.
But I have the ability of creating commercial quantities of fish.
That's a good answer to that question.
So right now, I mean, my fish room is 10 by 10, so it's basically a bedroom size. And then I have a few tanks outside of that. But before I had the few tanks outside of it, I could pump out, 500 to 1,000 angelfish a month.
Yeah, wow.
Without even thinking about it, So yeah, I just I take my small space that I have and create the most out of it that I can.
Yeah, just optimizing the available room.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you keep up with the amount of fish that are being produced and that you're caring for and all that sort of stuff? Do you have a very strict routine to yourself, for them? How does that kind of go about?
So my lights are all automatic.
Yeah.
I actually also have auto water changing by the method that I consider the dilution method, or dissolution, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
So I'm adding water to the tank and the extra will overflow.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
And I can vary that per tank. Like if I have a really crowded tank, I want more water to go in there, I can open the valve up a little further, or I can water change for a little longer, either or. So those two things are kind of taken care of. So the lighting and the water change are taken care of. And then it's basically your normal tank maintenance, like cleaning the filters, scrubbing the sides of the tanks, and then feeding. So fry, I tend to try to feed 3 times a day. 2 of those feedings would be live baby brine shrimp. So the live baby brine shrimp, I have a routine that I follow pretty much religiously. It's restarted every day. I've been doing it that way for years. And then the feeding in between with, some sort of dry or frozen food, you want that to just be something that you can do really easy. You don't want it to foul the tank. So it becomes a routine that you just do it every day. So like usually the first feeding is 9 a.m, or between 9 and 10, let's say. And then sometime in the middle of the day, and the last feeding is at 8 or 9 at night.
It sounds like there's a lot of consistency going on for not only your fish as well, so they know this is happening about now, this is happening about now, and just
right,
rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
Is your automatic water change system constantly dripping, or is it on off sort of style?
It's on off. I control it with what you would consider a yard sprinkler timer.
Yep.
That timer is now, it didn't used to be, but now it is Bluetooth, so I can play with it with my phone.
Yeah. Yep. Nice.
So so with my phone, if I say okay, and it's in my case, I've split it up into 4 different racks in my fish room, one on each wall, and one wall is mostly all fry tanks. So I can say, okay, the fry need an extra water change. I can just put it in my phone and it'll just do it.
Okay, nice, easy.
Yeah, so yeah, it's pretty easy. I mean, like I say, you still have to go in and most of my tanks, I'm using some form or other of either matten filter or they're all sponge filters of some sort. And what I do, like say your typical 10-gallon fry tank has a matten filter in the back. It's racked endwise, so you're only looking at the end. As the fry cycle through that tank, so they might go in that tank at 2 weeks old, and they might be in that tank until they're 2 months to 3 months old, depending on how fast they grow. Angelfish would be less time because they grow faster. Rainbows would be longer because they grow slower. But depending on how long they're in that tank, when I move them from that tank to the next size up, then that tank is basically, I take the filter out, I squeeze it out a couple times. I take a dish brush, if best words I can say. It's a brush used for washing dishes, and I brush down all the sides of the tank to get any scum, and the bottom. The bottoms are bare, so scrub that off, drain it, refill it, put the filter back up, and it's ready for the next group of fry.
Yep.
So that that I can do that to a tank in about a half an hour. Luca, come here. Can you hear him barking in the background?
Sure can.
Luca, come here. It's a bright sunny day here, and the neighbors walking by with their dogs on their leash.
Yeah.
So. Anyway, yeah.
So what sort of percentage of water changes are you going through your adult racks and your fry racks sort of per day?
It goes off twice a day. Usually after the morning feeding and after the evening feeding.
Okay.
And what I've done is the best way I could describe it is let's use a 20-gallon tank as an example. And let's just say, for sake of example, I want to change 20% of that. So what I've done is I've drained the tank down to where I want to change. And I've done this to do the setup process. I drain the tank down, and then I turn the water change off system on. And I find out how long does it take to put that much water in.
Right. Yep.
So let's just say, for sake of example, it takes 10 minutes to put that 20% of water back. Okay. Now, I know, and you know, that since I'm not draining the tank to do the water change, I'm going to have to add more than that 10 minutes of water if I'm going to change 20% of that water. So I double that time to 20 minutes. And then, being that I'm doing it twice a day, then I subtract that. I split it, so I do it 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes at night, and it changes about that much water. But like I said, it's not an actual water change. I did just recently visit a guy in Chicago's room where he has all of his tanks drilled twice, one for a drain and one for fill and overflow. And so, and he talks to Alexa to help. He says, Alexa, drain tank 4, and it drains up to a certain level, and then
full use technology.
Be right back.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning or this evening or afternoon or wherever it is you might well be. Question to come up from here.
Close the drapes, it works.
So we've had a question from someone watching, and he wants to know, or they want to know, if you've seen any fish come in or out of fashion over the years you've been in the hobby.
If I've seen what?
Any fish sort of come in of fashion and out of fashion and maybe even come back in again?
Oh, yes. African cichlids. That's a really good example.
Okay.
So back when they first hit the market, super, super popular. And then they kind of went away. Then they came back, and then they've gone away with right now the whole thing up here anyway is nano. Mm-hmm. And I think where nano comes from is people are living in smaller and smaller spaces.
Yeah, totally agree.
So it's easy to get a small tank than a big tank, even though, in my opinion, a big tank is easier to maintain.
Also agree. Yeah.
So African cichlids has come and gone a couple times in my neck of the woods. I think they will come back again, especially the smaller ones. Mm-hmm. Another one that was really popular here for a long time was the smaller pelvichromis species. They've gone through a whole bunch of renaming and everything with those. But that's a great little fish, especially you want to start breeding some fish and learning about them. They're not hard to breed. They're not hard to raise. Mm-hmm. It's a great little fish. And, it's come and gone a couple times. But I do think most fish will, even though they've gone, they'll come back.
Yeah.
It also does revolve a little bit around, are they still being exported from the wild?
Yeah, sure.
Because there's some countries that have shut down exportation where you can't get fish from that country. So if they're not already in the system, or if someone's not breeding them, you won't get them anymore. Another ones that I've seen that are a little bit, and I use the word cyclical because they kind of cycle through. Some of the rainbows, they come and go. And I know it has to do with, is anybody maintaining them? In the United States, a lot of popular fish like that end up going through our fish farms. Mm-hmm. And if the fish farms haven't picked them up, then your only source is to get them from overseas or from someone that is shipping them in. Yeah. So,
are you allowed to buy from exporters and bring them in to your own self, or do you have to go through a third-party wholesaler importer type of scenario?
So, kind of both. Now, if I'm just Joe Blow off the street, I would probably have to go through like a site called Aquabid mm-hmm. or eBay, and anything that would have to clear customs would have to go through a transshipper, or a wholesaler. I actually have my own import license because I've gone to Peru, so I got it for importing fish. It's basically, it's not expensive to get. I didn't think it was $100 to get. It's like $50 to renew it every year. Mm-hmm. So that alone will pay for transshippers fees.
Yeah.
But I've bought fish, or I shouldn't say I bought like rice fish eggs from Japan. Mm-hmm. They were just sent through the mail.
Wow. Yeah.
And they got here. They actually went through customs in Chicago. They sat in Chicago for 2 weeks. And the guy that had shipped them to me, he was totally panicked. He says, normally they take like less than 5 days to clear, and I'm going to have to ship you. Well, when I got them, I noticed there's only 3 eggs in the vials.
Yeah.
But all of them have hatched. There's a whole bunch of fish swimming about. So all I had to do is feed them, So yeah, but I spent a little bit of time in Canada. Everything in Canada is imported.
Okay.
Most of it not from the United States. Most of it is from Europe or Asia.
Mm-hmm.
So, you just have to do what you have to do to get them. I mean, collecting wise, I would love to go collecting other places.
Yeah.
But it's just not in the cards right now. So,
Cameron's mentioned something in the comments. So he runs a store up in the North Island of New Zealand for where we are, and it's completely contrasting to what you have. We have, I think, maybe 4 or 5 freshwater import facilities.
Okay.
Cost thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to set one up. Very strongly regulated. The list of fish that's not available is ginormous. So it's completely contrasting styles of one nation to another nation and what's allowed to be kept and bought in and yeah.
So do you feel like yours they don't allow importation of a lot of fish because they could live in the wild there?
I believe that is the reasoning. I don't personally believe that a lot that are off the import list would be able to live here in the wild.
Okay.
I'm only speaking for my region. It gets relatively cold. It gets colder further down south. Lots of frost, lots of snow. I think a lot of those tropical fish wouldn't survive. Up north, absolutely. And so I completely understand the laws and legislation and why it's there. But I think it is for making sure our ecosystem is kept safe, which is a absolutely fair and valid reason for that to not be happening.
Well, it's interesting because I think it was either last fall or this spring. I took the trek to Florida to go to the ALA, American Live Bears Association thing. And we spent one day collecting wild fish on the fringe of the Everglades.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the wild fish that we collected were aquarium fish from other countries that had what happens is the fish farms are outdoor when they have the floods and stuff, the ponds overflow, they get into the natural ecosystem and then they establish there. So I caught all sorts of fish that this isn't from Florida. In the whole day, I only caught one fish that was native to Florida.
Wow.
And that was one small of the Florida sunfish.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of people have looked at that and said, "Oh, look what's happened here by the importation and raising them in fish farms. We don't want that. We don't want that in my neck of the woods." Interestingly, when you go to the wholesalers in Peru, which are fairly primitive, you see all fish from all over the country or all over the world there.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That they sell to their local markets. Yeah. So there's aquarists anywhere, in the world that are keeping fish from other areas in the world. But there's one collecting locale in Peru where you can catch blue grammies by the netful.
Yeah, I've spoke to, I think it was Dr. Anthony Meserole a little while back about that, and blew my mind the amount that they're just such a pest over there.
Yeah. And it's basically someone either let them out or they got out somehow, and they found this locale and
they're good.
They took over.
Yeah, we've got a lot of that with koi fish up in the North Island. There's rivers that are just full of them, and carp's another one. It's just Yeah, I can totally understand and agree with the rulings and the reasons behind it. Some of it just doesn't make sense. Like, you're allowed to bring in Brachati, but you're not allowed to bring in like a Daffodili, for example, which are almost identical. Kind of makes no sense with a lot of stuff like that. But
right,
it's the rules. It is what it is.
yeah.
Do you have like specific requests to breed fish or particular fish, or do you do what you do for because you want to do it?
There's two ways I can answer that. So
Okay.
a lot of you know that I've done a lot of videos on the Co-op channel.
Mm-hmm.
I met Corey at a fish club meeting, our local fish club meeting. At that point in time, he was a monster fish keeper.
Mm-hmm.
And I was primarily doing apistos at that time. And I had spawned these pure white short fin bettas. And I had like thousands of them. That's a mistake, by the way. Don't do that. Because when they get to be about an inch and a quarter, you need to have 1,000 jars too. Yep. And so, Corey had opened his shop. And I remember going in there one day and I said, I got billions of these bettas. You want to sell them? And he goes, sure. Let's make a deal. I said, okay, well, I'll just give you them all for $1 each. You take all of them and you can sell them or give them away. I don't care. And it took him a year to get rid of that tank. There were so many.
Wow.
But in that process, about 2 months later, he called me up and he goes, Dean, he says, I have something I want you to breed. And I'm like, well, what is it? He says, well, it's these super red koi angels. Mm-hmm. And he said at that point in time, they were retailing for, I want to say, $25, $30 each at dime size. They were really expensive, new on the market. I said, well, you realize if I take those, it's a year before you're going to have babies. I said, so how are we going to do this? He says, I'm going to give you the angelfish. You're going to give me the first spawn. After that, we can buy them from you.
Fair trade. Yep.
I said, well, what if the first spawn is only 10? He said, it doesn't matter. It's a trust thing. So, we did that. So, yeah. So sometimes I get requests. I mean, sometimes some of the plecos, he will say, I want you to take these and grow them up and breed them. Now, Corey now is not working in the shop anymore. So that's less and less. But yeah, so sometimes I get requests. But one of my, what would you call it? A fault in the hobby, kind of, is I have a hard time buying fish and not spawning them.
Yep.
Or not trying to spawn them.
Yeah.
So even if I'm getting, tetras for dither fish, I'm like, I kind of want to try to spawn those. Yeah. So that's yeah. And that's a hard thing when going to Peru. It's like, okay, what do I bring back?
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's times when you can put your net into a dried up or halfway dried up little creek and come up with 14 species in one net.
Wow.
And it'll be anything from cories to pencilfish to tetras to dwarf cichlids, knife fish. And, you get a hold of those and you go like, but what do I want to take home? Because if you're not taking it home, then you just want to take pictures and put it back.
Yep.
And anymore, going to Peru, it's like, okay, I've seen those. I've done that. I mean, there's only been one catfish that I brought back, or I should say one Corridor species that I brought back that I have not been able to spawn. Mm-hmm. But yet some of the ones you spawn, no one wants them.
Right. Yeah.
So they're just not, they're not a popular fish. So yeah.
So that kind of leads me on to my next question: is do you choose specific species to breed, or are you led by demand?
I usually pick the ones that, if I want to breed them, I pick them.
Yeah.
At the same time, let's go back to angelfish really quick.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how angelfish are in your shops, but in my shops, they're always in demand.
Yeah, relatively. Yep. Yep.
So one pair of angelfish done right will pay for your whole fish room over the course of a year.
Yeah.
If you think about it, because typically, if you were to pull the eggs, they're going to lay eggs about every week to 10 days. Let's just say, most times you're going to get a spawn anywhere between 300 and 400. Let's just say you get 200 fry to live to saleable point. You're going to sell those or trade them for equipment. My whole fish room was built on angelfish. And I joke around, angelfish is my currency in the business, in the fish business, because you can always sell them. If one shop doesn't want them, the next one does.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've continually bred some form of ram for, I don't know how long as I can remember. Right now I'm on to the black ones, but they're not even my most favorite ones. It's just they're in demand.
Yeah.
I've continually bred. I only do 2 strains of angelfish. I don't do mixed ones, and I don't do any other strains right now. I do Philippine blues,
mm-hmm.
and I do the super red kois. And that's enough, And even those, sometimes I have too many of them, too many fry.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
The rams will always sell, but rams are also more difficult than angelfish.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have less success. Even if you're a really good breeder, you're still going to have less success with rams and angelfish.
Yeah.
So,
just a bit weaker, smaller spawns.
Smaller spawns, weaker, more prone to crashing. Mm-hmm. And all of that can happen in anybody's tank. I mean, I've had it happen. I've been traveling a lot, so then if I'm not there to spot something, I come back. They might look fine, but they're not. So mm-hmm. Yeah.
Have you spent any time with the checkerboard cichlids? Sorry.
Yeah, I love those.
Yeah. Have you got any successfully bred them?
I have bred them.
Yeah.
They like really soft water and mm-hmm. Fairly acidic also.
Okay. Cool.
I used to use, before we had these, what we call the Indian almond leaves or the catappa leaves.
Yep.
I used to use peat moss, boil it and make my own tea. In the early days, there was Tetra Black Water Tonic.
Yes.
Which was basically just condensed tea water, basically, from boiling peat.
Yeah.
So I would spawn those by the pair in a 5-gallon tank.
Wow.
And generally, I would let them take care of their own fry.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can take the cave. They usually spawn in a cave. You can take the cave out and hatch them. The fry are big enough to take some baby brine shrimp from the very beginning. I also use Java moss and mm-hmm. other kind of plant matter where they can munch on little whatever's on the plant,
Yeah.
But that's a really cool fish. I spent a number of years where I had 18 5-gallon tanks set up only for dwarf cichlids.
You're right. Wow.
And some of them I have never seen in the industry since.
Cool.
Although one of them that I really like, the Taniacara candidi. I love that fish. This last summer I saw 2 males at someone's place who imported directly, but he got them as bycatch.
Okay. Yep.
So yeah.
Is there a particular species that you have tried over and over again and not been successful to spawn and raise, or is there nothing that hasn't worked for you at any point? Obviously, the puffers we spoke about earlier.
The puffers. I'll try those again someday when I get a hold of them. I think in recent history, but years ago it was plecos. Plecos evaded a lot of breeders in the early days, especially when you got into the L number plecos. And most of us had no idea what we were doing. I remember a buddy of mine, the first time I had seen a spawn of bristlenose plecos, they were in a tank. I would call it like probably a 30-gallon breeder size tank. So maybe 3 feet by 1.5 feet by maybe 1 foot deep.
Yep.
On his floor. And it was piled full of driftwood. Only filtration was aeration. There was no filter running. And he ended up with fry, and he didn't even know how. But he had been trying, and so I think what happens is a lot of us, we were going back to those buying young and growing them up. Well, my 3 examples was zebra plecos. First time I had them was when they first came in the hobby. They were very expensive. Got 10 of them. I raised them all the way for, 2.5 years, breeder size now. And we decided to move. And so I sold everything. Second time I got them, I had a dozen of them. I grew them up for about 3 years, never saw spawning activity, went out of town for a weekend, came back, and the heater had stuck on and killed them all.
Uh-huh.
So then I don't know in your country, but here they're on the CITES list now.
Yep.
Okay. So the month before I knew they were going on the list, I visited a wholesaler. And I said, you have those in? I said, I'll get some. So I got another dozen of them. They were about 1 inch long. I grew those up. I ended up with 10 of them. I lost 2 along the way, 10 of them adult size. It had been about 3 years, no spawns. And I remember seeing this guy that I bought them from at one of the shows I had gone to. And I said, I should just bring you those back because they're not spawning. And I got home that night and there were fry.
Nice. Well done.
So but most people will not wait 2 or 3 or 4 years for a fish like that to mature.
Yeah.
They want to buy a pair of fish and they want to produce young next month. And that's where you need other diversions in the hobby.
Totally agree.
Raise something else that's going to take a lot of your time, and then just maintain those as they're getting old. So like right now I have some blue seam plecos.
Wow. Yep.
They're about 7 inches long right now, and I've had them for 4 years. I've raised a lot of rams over the top of them, so to speak. But I haven't paid any attention to them except for growing them up and feeding them, because I knew that they take a while to mature. So you have to have something else that will divert you from that instant gratification, so to speak.
Yeah, I think plecos are a great example. Like, if you go on the Planet Catfish website and you start looking through the profiles, the amount that still say no spawning activity, no spawning documentation is still astronomically large. It's a huge world, the L number plecos.
Yeah, it's big.
Yeah.
I had the pleasure of visiting a guy who had an immense collection of Corydoras, like literally a warehouse space full.
Wow.
And I had never seen that many different types of Corydoras, and he had fry from almost all of them. Wow. But it was not from trying; it was from outlasting.
Yep.
You know, he would just grow them and grow them and grow them and grow them, and eventually they get old enough where they're going to spawn. So he did have good water there also.
I think you make a valid point of having other things to distract you. You've got a half a dozen tanks of water there. They just you feed, forget, and then working on other stuff, and all of a sudden, they're mature and doing their thing.
Well, I think it takes your mind off of that instant gratification.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. So yeah.
Have you collected fish from other parts of the world or just Peru?
Only Peru. I really want. I want to do. I want to go to Australia. That's my big bucket list from a long, long time ago. I would like to go also to New Guinea, and I would like to go to Africa, Venezuela, Brazil. Brazil's shut down exportation.
Okay.
So you could collect and see them there, but you can't take them back.
Yeah, wow.
Although I did find a workaround from that. Because I have an import license, I could collect and I could buy from a local wholesaler.
Yeah.
Not quite the same as collecting, but I thought, well, what if I collected them, took them to the wholesaler, and then bought them back from him? So I don't know. I mean, so there's a lot of places that are on the bucket list, but right now the travel is so hard right now, and Africa's not super safe. Most of South America is not really safe. Peru's really safe as long as you stay away from the illegal gold mining.
Noted.
And then, I would also like just to visit like Asia. I'd love to go to Germany and just visit breeders. I mean, that's a big time.
Yeah. The world of African cichlids in Germany is huge.
It's major.
Phenomenal African cichlids over there.
Yeah. And also, not just Germany, but I was going to say Turkey, Israel. There's a lot of breeding happening there that is beyond what we can comprehend right now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
We've touched on discus and Corydoras already. Is there any sort of tips or triggers that you've got that have helped you along the way with producing them or raising them?
For discus and Corys?
Yeah. I know two completely different species, of course, but yeah.
Okay, so Corydoras, the first thing is grow them up. And Corydoras are relatively easy to sex. I mean, you can look at them from the top, and think of it. I kind of think of it this way: the females are kind of like diamond shaped, a little bit squished diamond shape.
Yep.
And the males are a squished diamond shape, but have more tail in one direction. If that makes sense.
A little bit, yeah. Yep.
So basically, the females are fatter, the males are thinner. Put 5 males, 2 females together, and once they're really fat and conditioned, put them together. And in my case, I can almost always trigger them with a cool water change. Now, one thing I have noticed, especially since bringing fish back from Peru, if I can trigger that water change with a change in our weather, It's major.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So if, let's just say for sake of example, I know it's going to rain on Saturday. If I can trigger that water change Friday night and rain Saturday, I almost will always get a spawn.
Okay. Wow.
Now with Corys, I always take the eggs away because otherwise they don't really intentionally predate the eggs, but they will smash them even if it's by accident, they will smash them just by their nature of, going up and sniffing them probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
So from that perspective, that's what I would do with Corys. With discus, again, I come back to maybe if you have the ability of growing a group of them up, your success is going to be far better than if you go. I mean, let's look at it this way. If someone's going to sell you a pair of discus, why would they sell you those fish? Because they're not having success with that pair. No one's going to sell their best pair.
That's a very good point.
And I've sold pairs of discus before. I've never sold my best pair. I've sold good pairs, but never my best, because your best pair is producing discus for you.
Yeah, that makes a completely valid point.
So buying a pair of discus is, that's playing Russian roulette, so to speak. They may never spawn for you in your own tanks, ever. Yeah. So, but if you have the chance to grow them up yourselves, get them at least a year old before you get any spawning activity. They will want to start spawning at about 9 months, but try to put that off till about a year, so they're good and mature. And then again, once you get a pair, you should separate it out, and you can usually trigger a pair to spawn with good feeding and some water changes. Yeah. And with discus, sometimes you might have to do 2 or 3 water changes, in a row, like maybe morning, night, like that. And eventually you should get a spawn.
Okay, cool. So we've had someone just ask a question regarding the corridors. Oh. Yeah. Do you keep them apart pre-spawning or leave them in a group? Essentially, is the way of reading that.
I've done both. If you have the ability and time, this is the Zen Ginger. I think I know that person. If you have the time to separate them, that can be to your advantage. You'll get bigger spawns. But if not, so when I say bigger spawns, when you put them together, the spawning will happen all at once. So it might be multiple females are spawning at the same time. Whereas if you leave them in a group, it might be, you might get this one spawns on Monday, this one spawns on Wednesday, this one spawns on Saturday. If production is your goal, you want them to try to trigger them all to spawn at the same time.
Yep. So that is the end of all my structured questions that I've written down for you.
Okay.
I like to finish all my sort of coffee dates with a very quick set of 6 questions that are short and sweet, yes, no sort of answers.
Okay.
So if there's anywhere that you could visit right at this moment, where would it be?
Right now, if there was any way, I would go to Australia.
Okay, cool. If you could have any superpower in the world, what would it be?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
If you could have any superpower in the world, what would it be?
Anti-aging.
Okay, cool. If when you're doing a coin flip, are you heads or tails?
I'm a head.
Okay. If you could have a meal with anybody from any point in the time, who would it be?
I would like to have a meal with Gordon Ramsay.
Fair.
That probably offers some explanation, but that's because my last official position, I was a culinary instructor.
Mm-hmm.
And I know from people that I've known that have worked for him, his TV presence is far different than what he's like in person.
I can imagine. Are we alone in the universe?
No.
Okay. And my last one is, what is your unicorn fish that you've either never kept, never caught, or never spawned?
Never kept, never caught, never spawned.
Can be any of those, just any sort of combination, any one you want.
I've never spawned I've spawned Grommies before, but I've never spawned or really kept the little tiny licorice type Grommies. There's a whole family of them.
Yeah, wow. Just recently we've had a whole bunch coming to New Zealand, and they're phenomenal.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of different varieties of those.
Yeah.
That are different, little bit different color morphs and stuff. I would like to get into those for a while.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. That's all I've got. So I'd like to say thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it. I'm sure everybody's taken something out of this. So thank you very much for your time. We very much appreciate it.
You bet. We'll have to do it again sometime.
Sounds good to me. Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right, guys. Have a good one. Happy fish keeping. Catch you later.
You too.
See you later.
Cheers.